Glad to see everybody here. And we're going to have a really, really good forum today with Tom Morgan, who you all know, and he has an authority on all things Russian. And we are just lucky to have him here because Russia is in the news so much. So anyway, the title of his talk is How Putin Talks to Russians. And I will just turn it over to Tom. Okay, Tom, can you take it away?
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you for the invitation. I'm going to try to share my screen and see how that works. And I think it will work. Let's try it. Is it working?
Looks great.
All right. I just, again, thank you for all coming. I put up those two quotes. I'm not going to read them to you. I know you're all literate, but it reminds me that Russia is, or I hope reminds all of us, that Russia is a really tricky subject to talk about. A personal example, I was in Russia twice, in Soviet Union twice for two extended visits in the 1970s, where these weren't tourist trips. We were actually living and functioning like Russians. Well, the second one, I was actually working at a language institute in a town in southern Russia. And coming back from those two visits, I came back with the idea that this country is not sustainable economically. It just can't survive. You would spend typically a couple of hours, 2 or 3 hours a day, just standing in line getting bread. And even as late as 1989 on one of my trips, I remember it took me a week and a half to find a toothbrush, and I had Russians helping me looking in the stores for a toothbrush. So I thought to myself, this can't continue. The country is not sustainable in an economic sense. It can't deliver goods and services. After my second trip there in the, 75, or I think it was, I come back to my Ohio State University where I was a graduate student, and there is I'm going to meet Richard Pipes, who was at that time the most prestigious Sovietologist, Kremlinologist in the United States. He was from Harvard University. He gave a talk, and he said it was a unstoppable, the Soviet Union was an unstoppable and unchangeable autocracy, that it was just so efficiently run that we're going to have to, dig in for the long haul. And I thought to myself that maybe Mr. Pipes has been spending too much time in the library at Harvard, and he should go out and actually see how this country functions. But I didn't say anything because, after all, this was Richard Pipes and I was just a lowly graduate student. Well, I don't know, 25 years later, it did collapse. And I submit to you, the Soviet Union collapsed because of economic pressures more than anything else. So I suppose I was right, and Richard Pipes was wrong. On the other hand, it lasted another 25 years after Richard Pipes gave his talk. So maybe Richard Pipes was right. I don't know, but I just tell you that because anything I say, what I'm about to say from this moment on, is strictly my opinion. And I spend most of my life these days in Duluth, Minnesota. So I'm just like Richard Pipes, I'm not actually there all the time. But so you're getting opinions. And today, mostly, I want to talk about Putin because that's the topic. A couple of years ago, I want you to know that I was in Moscow, and I was near the Kremlin, kind of a side door to the Kremlin. I had an appointment to see somebody, and it was in the morning, and I was waiting, and a big black Volga drives up, and out pops Vladimir Putin. He's on his way to work. Well, fortunately, I had a video camera with me. So I shot some scenes, and I'm going to show them to you, of a typical workday for Vladimir Putin. He's on his way to work, and I thought you ought to see this. So here we go. If I can make it work. No, wait, I can't. Just a minute. Just a minute. Just a minute. I've got to do something else here for you can hear the sound. Can you hear the sound if I go like this? Can you hear the sound?
Not yet. I think you'll need to reshare, and then the second time check the audio box in the bottom left.
Yeah, I'm trying to find that. Darn it.
Oh, you're great, Tom. Even the visuals will be great. But if
Yeah, but I know I want to show you the.
you reshare, and then in the bottom left, there's a share sound checkbox. Right before.
Yeah, and that's what I couldn't find. Oh, there it is. Okay, now we got it. Sorry. Pardon that little.
No worries.
But I want you to see this because, as I said, it's just a day on the job for Mr. Putin.
Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin.
По Георгиевскому, Александровскому и Андреевскому залам Владимир Путин пройдет под звуки торжественного марша Петра Ильича Чайковского.
Okay, well, maybe that's enough of that. But I just wanted you to see how he starts his workday. It's a lucky thing I was there with that camera. Whoops, whoops, whoops. Stay a minute, stop that. How do I stop that? There. I don't want any more. Now, how do I get out of this? I'm trying to go, there we go. Okay, are you with me? Where was I? Here's those who doubt Putin's vital role in the victory of the Great Patriotic War simply do not understand his essential role in the baptism of Russia. That's a contemporary Russian joke. I'm not sure it flies that well in an American audience, but during the Q&A, maybe I can explain why that's pretty funny. I submit to you all that Putin stands on the shoulders of Russian history. He didn't invent himself. He's very much a product of the Russian story, the Russian myth, however you want to put it. And so here's how I would define maybe the Russian national story. This is the heritage that Putin is has received. First of all, Russia is very much part of Western civilization, no question about that, but it's missing a few chapters. I talked about this at some length, I think, in another presentation to this group, so I'm not going to go there anymore, except that essentially Russia missed the Renaissance and the Reformation and the Enlightenment, which really informs the Russian character in many ways, or the fact that we in the West have developed because of those phenomena, maybe informs our character. In any case, it makes us different. And for the Russians, this makes them unique. I coined this term, Russian exceptionalism. We talk about American exceptionalism all the time, don't we? At least that's the message that is being transmitted, I think, on the part of a lot of people, American exceptionalism. But for Russians, for many Russians, they're following a unique path. They're not Asian, they're not European. They have their own special Russian idea, and the West in particular, is a threat to those Russian values. I picked up this quote from Tyutchev, a 19th century Russian poet. It expresses that idea, which is still widely held. I see some of these ideas in the remarks that Putin makes to the Russian people. There's not a single interest, not a single trend in the West which does not conspire against Russia, especially her future, and does not try to harm her. Therefore, Russia's only natural policy towards the West must be to seek not an alliance with Western powers, but their disunion and division. Russia is a very difficult country to defend, or put it another way, it's a very easy country to invade. There have been numerous invasions of Russia in its history. And I'll just mention invasions from the West, let alone the East or the South. Since the 17th century, the Russians have been invaded by the Poles, by the Swedes, by the French, and twice in the 20th century by the Germans. The world is a dangerous place for Russians, and nobody is going to help the Russians. They're going to have to help themselves and to protect themselves against the dangers that are at hand, and particularly from the West, and there you have it. The fact is, even despite these invasions, Russia, the story it tells itself, has saved Western civilization repeatedly. In particular, let's say even going back before then, the Mongol invasion or numerous Muslim invasions have more or less been stopped in Russia. And because of that, Western civilization was allowed to flourish, so the Russians tell themselves. In the 19th century, Napoleon really met his Waterloo, so to speak, in Moscow. And he had his first really ignominious defeat. And the Russian army chased Napoleon all the way back to Paris and dictated the peace of Europe. Nobody gives Russia credit for that. And then, of course, you have the German invasion in World War II, where I think the figure is typically about 27 million people lost in World War II. Arguably, speaking about World War II, certainly the Americans defeated the Japanese in the Pacific theater, but in the European theater, the bulk of the fighting was on the Eastern Front from 1941 to 1944, certainly. 75–80% of all German casualties in that period were on the Eastern Front. The Russians tell themselves that they were holding off Hitler while Roosevelt and Churchill and de Gaulle and the rest of them were dillying about how to open up a Western front. So they saved Europe again, and they get no respect for this. Then into the 20th century, you see the collapse of their empire. The Soviet Union collapses kind of its own accord. And all of a sudden, overnight, the country went from a major world power, a major player in global affairs, to a basket case, economically speaking. And that was humiliating for the Russians. I was a part of, here in Duluth, some of you may remember it, one of the spokesmen was Michelle Leave, a Channel 6 TV commentator. We were raising humanitarian assistance for the Russians, for Petrozavodsk. I was in Petrozavodsk during some of these humanitarian deliveries, and they were getting, clothing and children's shoes and all kinds of stuff like that, blankets. And they were coming, of course, from the Americans, but mostly in Petrozavodsk, they were coming from Finland and from Germany. That was enormously humiliating. These were the countries, Finland and Germany, that Russia defeated in World War II, and now they are paupers begging for scraps from Germany and Finland. So that's another public humiliation. And the mere fact of the collapse of the Soviet Union led to them being downgraded, as it were, in global affairs. And the commentary from some Americans didn't help. I just picked a couple of really disrespectful remarks made by American presidents. By the grace of God, America won the Cold War, from Barack Obama. The United States is and remains the one indispensable nation. Russia is a smaller country, a weaker country. Their economy doesn't produce anything that anybody wants to buy except oil and gas and arms. This public humiliation that Russia has endured sits with them today and is very meaningful. And the final point that I want to make is about the so-called Russian, I call this the Russian Monroe Doctrine. You know all about the Monroe Doctrine in the early 19th century, when President Monroe said Europeans and everybody else should stay away from the Western Hemisphere. This is our sphere of influence. Well, the Russians feel that way very strongly about the so-called near abroad. These are the other 14 republics in the former Soviet Union, places like Ukraine and Georgia and the Baltic republics, Belarus, and the list goes on, Uzbekistan. These are all independent countries now, but they are full of Russians, full of Russian speakers. And Russia today feels very strongly that this is their sphere of influence. Anybody else should stay out. Russia sees itself, and Putin sees himself, as somebody who is defending the interests of Russians everywhere and the Russian diaspora. Let me show you something else, if I can make this work, from popular culture that may illustrate that. If I can, I'm sure I can. It just takes me a while all the time to get these things put up. I guess I can't. How do I get rid of this? Help me, somebody. So I don't want that.
You're not sure what you're looking at, but are you trying to minimize your window or
Yeah,
maximize the other one?
trying to get rid of this in front of me. I don't know what you're seeing.
You stop sharing, so we don't see what you see.
Yeah.
But I think if you minimize the Microsoft Word, or go back down to your tool taskbar at the very bottom and maybe click on the other browser window.
I can't seem to do it. Well, this is awkward. There we go. There, I finally did it.
Oh, we kept the
Whatever.
faith.
What's that?
We kept the faith.
All right. Yeah. I wanted to show you this from popular Russian culture, if I can find you people now. Where are you? I've lost you.
You want us to wave around for a little while so you can follow our voice?
I can't find the There you are. Okay. All right. This time it's going to work. I promise you.
Парень снова влип в дурные дела, подрался, наглотался какой-то мути. Он так меня достал, я его прогнала, и я хочу теперь такого, как Путин. Такого, как Путин, полного сил. Такого, как Путин, чтобы не пил. Такого, как Путин, чтоб не обижал. Такого, как Путин, чтоб не убежал. Я видела его вчера в новостях. Он говорил о том, что мир на распутье. С таким, как он, легко и дома, и в гостях. И я хочу теперь такого, как Путин. Такого, как Путин, полного сил. Такого, как Путин, чтобы не пил. Такого, как Путин, чтоб не обижал. Такого, как Путин, чтоб не убежал. Такого, как Путин, полного сил. Такого, как Путин, чтобы не пил. Такого, как Путин, чтобы не обижал. Такого, как Путин, чтобы не убежал. Такого, как Путин, полного сил. Такого, как Путин, чтобы не пил. Такого, как Путин, чтобы не обижал. Такого, как Путин, чтобы не убежал. Такого, как Путин, полного сил. Такого, как Путин, чтобы не пил. Такого, как Путин, чтоб не обижал. Такого, как Путин, чтоб не убежал. Такого, как Путин.
Okay, this time I got it back easier, didn't I? So that's Putin. That's the message he's sending. A tough guy, somebody who is, goodness, it keeps coming back. A tough guy who isn't going to be let anyone push him around, especially the West. Now, remember, Russia had a whole series of really geriatric leaders, beginning with Brezhnev, followed by Andropov, and then remember Chernomyrdin, and then even Gorbachev, who was not geriatric, but Gorbachev committed the ultimate sin. He basically gave away the Russian Empire to the West. It collapsed under Gorbachev. So, and then Yeltsin was a drunk. And things went from bad to worse under Yeltsin. Enormous inflation, huge poverty, and tremendous separation of the wealth. Kind of a 1% of the Russians under Yeltsin ended up with all the wealth, and everybody else was impoverished. So Putin promised to put things in order, establish discipline, and when he came into office, and he essentially delivered, and he was pretty popular and continues to be. Those first 8 years of his rule, wages continued to grow, the economy went up, the national wealth also increased. And by the way, Putin himself, part of his strategy, I believe, was to make some kind of accommodation with the West to bring Russia back into kind of the Western family of nations. And he really did make some gestures to cooperate, I believe. For example, he was the first person to contact President George W. Bush after the 9/11 attacks to offer help. He offered help repeatedly, especially with fighting terrorism. The Russians warned us about the terrorist attacks that ultimately happened in Boston at the Boston Marathon. He's made numerous attempts to, as I said earlier, in the first 6 to 8 years of his administration, to work with the West. Even as late as 2015, he said, "We've never viewed Europe as a mistress. I'm quite serious now. We always have proposed a serious relationship." But the problem is, in my opinion, we in the West, in the United States in particular, have helped create Putin. And I'm just going to run through this very quickly because I want to leave time for Q&A. But here are some of the things that we have done in the West, and particularly the United States, to make the Russians angry at us, to make the Russians feel humiliated. The shock therapy of the 1990s under Yeltsin, when we basically impoverished the country, and our hands were all over that. I was there a lot in the 1990s. I could see the influence of American ideas there, and leading to the impoverishment of the country. The German reunification deal was made with Gorbachev and President H.W. Bush. Germany would be allowed to be reunified with Gorbachev's permission. He wouldn't try to interfere. And the deal was NATO would not expand. Germany would be allowed to join NATO, but nobody else. Well, the fact is, I think there's 29 nations in NATO. Russia is essentially encircled now with NATO powers, and what it sees as hostile powers. What is the purpose of NATO? To keep Russia down. I think that's how the Russians feel about it. And so that was a betrayal. NATO involvement in the wars in Yugoslavia. I could go into that at greater length, but maybe in the Q&A. But even Yeltsin said, today Yugoslavia, tomorrow Russia. This is very dangerous for Russia. There have been repeated overtures in the last 10 years, both by NATO and the European Union, to Ukraine, Georgia, and Moldova. This is the near abroad, right? To get Ukraine and Georgia and Moldova to be a part of NATO or a part of the European Union. To say nothing of the Baltic republics, they are also the near abroad, and they've already joined those organizations. US sponsoring regime change in Iraq and Libya is seen as hostile acts. George W. Bush's withdrawal, unilateral withdrawal of the ABM treaty in 2002, anti-ballistic missile treaty, Russia saw that as a hostile act. And now the placing of those missiles in Poland aimed right at Russia. Imagine how we would feel if there were missiles in Canada aimed right at us. Our hands are all over the uprising in Ukraine. I can talk about that at greater length if you want in the Q&A. I mean, the Russians see us as fomenting that revolution, overthrowing an elected president, and essentially proxy wars, both in Georgia and Ukraine, involving Americans. So all these things are seen as hostile acts and feed into the Russian mentality of a hostile world out there and a world ready for another invasion. Putin has finally, not finally, but has responded. And I give you several quotes here from that, that Putin has said. Some of these are, they're all for the consumption of the Russian people, of course, but they were also directed at the United States. Our country will continue to actively defend the rights of Russia. using the entire range of available means. Our most serious mistake in relations with the West is that we trusted you too much. And your mistake is that you took that trust as weakness and abused it. You did not listen to us when we objected to your unilateral and withdrawal from the anti-ballistic missile treaty in 2002, or when we opposed NATO enlargement. You disrespected us, you treated us as junior partners, and you took us for granted. But Russia is back and will respond to any provocation from you. You must at least take us seriously now. So that's Putin's response. He's also very, very aggressively pushing a variety of economic associations with other countries to get away from the European Union and to form new relationships outside of the West. And I've listed 4 of them, you know, and these are all at one level or another fairly successful. He's had some success. He's brought Russia back at least to becoming a serious contender, as Marlon Brando would say, on the all-water front. Let me give you one more song from popular culture in Russia, and then I'll let the Q&A happen. But I want you to see one more. I think I can make this work. Because I think this one also is very telling. Whoops, I can't always do it, but I try. No, that. I don't know what you're hearing there, but
Not hearing anything, Tom.
what's that?
Not hearing anything.
All right, let me try something else. This may not happen if I can. There I go. There we go. I finally got it. Sorry about these hiccups. All right. I think this was worth waiting for. Another song from popular culture.
The screen share might be off.
Yeah, I
We're
know.
not
I'm coming.
seeing anything.
It's coming.
Okay.
I think it's coming. In fact, I don't see anything now.
You got it.
Where are you? There you are. Okay,
Hello.
I'm back.
There it is. Don't hit that.
So that should.
Well, maybe this is not worth waiting for if I can't get it. I'm going to try one more time, one more trick. There we go. This will be worth waiting for if I can make it work.
About Vladimir Putin, praising his power and his glory.
Владимир Путин молодец, политик, лидер и борец. Наш президент страну поднял, Россию Путин не предал.
The songs run the gamut. They go from powerful patriotic anthems sweet love ballads.
А ты Путин, да ты же Путин.
There's even this hip-hop song, all meant to remind the Russians just how awesome their president is.
Мой лучший друг — это президент Путин. Мой лучший друг — это президент Путин.
For your delectation, we have put together a hit list of these songs, with translations and links to the videos. My personal favorite goes a little bit like this. Идут на нас с войной страны НАТО, хотят нарушить вечно наш покой. Их бабы без грудей бородаты, а наши бабы с грудью, ох, какой. Их бабы без грудей бородаты, а наши бабы с грудью, ох, какой.
На всех фронтах.
Лидер и борец. Наш президент.
Парандами машет. Мозги им надо поменять, а не конституцию.
I'm Georgi Lonsadze for Coda Story.
Okay, I'll stop there. I have more to say, but I jammed in a lot. What can I do for you now? Questions?